There is absolutely no excuse anymore to not have a security plan in place at a church. None. If a parish doesn't have a security contingent, it's inexcusable. And I'm not buying that a poor parish can't afford to properly secure their parishioners. They can't afford not to. How many people have to die before bishops and pastors start taking this seriously? This last shooting in Minneapolis must serve as a wake-up call to these men, okay, to provide security for their parishioners. There's no excuse not to. In my last video, I talked about how many times and in the different ways I was dismissed whenever I approached a pastor of a Catholic church with my security concerns. Poo-pooed, with the denial, right? Nobody wanted to think that it would happen. Now, it very easily could have happened in South Florida as it did in Minneapolis. Could have happened in New York as it happened in Minneapolis. Could have happened on the West Coast in California. It can happen anywhere. We have to prepare. We have to at least have a plan in place. In this video, I'm going to go over church security, basic security plans that anybody can implement at a Catholic church. And I want to start out by saying there's a difference between prevention and mitigation. There's no plan that is going to prevent 100% of attackers or prevent 100% of people wanting to do some kind of harm or some kind of evil during a Catholic Mass. It's impossible. Look at what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, okay? You have this U.S. Secret Service who are supposed to be the best in the world at securing a presidential talk or visit or whatever, and they screwed it up big time, didn't they? So nobody and no plan is foolproof. These are just basic guidelines I want to go over that can at least help prevent probably the majority of the problems from starting. Now, mitigation has to do with, okay, the guy got past security, he attacked or he did something to, disrupt the Catholic Mass, whatever. This is how we mitigate. This is how we prevent it from getting worse. So there's a difference between prevention and mitigation, and I'm going to go over both of them. And of course, having some plan, any kind of plan is better than just going about this stuff blindly or not even doing anything at all and not even thinking about it. That's foolishness to the extreme. There's an old saying from the military and police work that failing to plan is planning to fail. And if you're not thinking about this stuff and coming up with a plan, you are failing your parishioners, you're failing your fellow parishioners, and pastors, you're failing your flock. Bishops, you're failing your flock if you don't come up with a plan. I was amazed when I was an active law enforcement officer, and like I said in my previous video, a big part of my job was homeland security type of stuff, securing synagogues, malls, schools, things like that, churches, and coming up with plans for them, for their security. I was amazed at how many times we had, I think, 4 or 5 different synagogues in our city, 2 of which had schools attached to them. They were constantly calling us, hey, can you come back over, do a reassessment of our security plan? Can you come over, give us more ideas or whatever? They were always hiring police officers off duty to be there, multiple officers, to be there on their high holy days and all that, or any other kind of activities that they would have other than their just regular services. They were plugged in to the idea of security. Okay, these are American Jews, not people from Israel. These people understood the need for security. Catholic people can really look to the Jewish people in terms of that. And look, there's a million different what ifs we can go through as I present these basic points on how to secure a church. Again, nothing is foolproof. These are just basic points maybe that you can build upon, but these are like the basic building blocks that you must have. First and foremost, the parish must foster a close working relationship with the local police department. They're the ones who are going to be responding. Invite them in. Let them see the layout of the church. Let them know who's who, who's in charge and who they can contact in case they have any kind of comments or concerns. When I was an active law enforcement officer, the church that we went to, our parish, was the Cathedral Parish. And it was the Diocese of Palm Beach. And I was blessed to work, live, and worship in the same city. And let me tell you, I knew that pastor very well. He had my cell phone number. I had his cell phone number. The bishop had my cell phone number, and I had his. And we spoke pretty often. I had 100 uniformed officers working for me at one point, and they all knew, oh, that's the major's church. So that cathedral parish got some really good patrols from the officers. But fostering a good working relationship with the local police department is just invaluable. In fact, there was one time that I was going to daily mass when I was a major. I was working day shift. So I would go to daily mass before going to work. And they were having mass in the chapel. And I knew it wasn't the pastor that was celebrating mass. It was another priest that I had known pretty well. And he was actually former military. And there was a suspicious guy sitting in the pews for mass. He had like a towel or a shirt wrapped around his head, and he had sunglasses on. And I remember there was a girl, I forget her name, but she worked pretty closely with the pastor. I think she did some kind of instruction, catechesis or something like that. And we knew her, our family knew her. And at one point she came over during mass and she sat down next to me. She whispered to me. Now I was in uniform because I was going to go to work as soon as I got done with mass. Chris, that guy's a problem. I think he's been given a trespass warning for the parish. I said, okay. And I didn't want to disrupt mass. He wasn't doing anything disruptive or anything. He was just sitting there. So I kind of crept up and sat closer to him just in case he jumped up, I could react. And I got on my radio before that though. And I had a couple of units come over and just to sit out in the parking lot in case something popped off. So comes time for communion, I go walking up, and the guy, it was funny because everybody in the congregation, they kind of gave way and they let me come up behind the guy. And he wants to receive. Obviously, it was obvious he had no clue as to how to receive. He wasn't Catholic. It was very, very evident. So the priest, he put the Eucharist back he kind of held it to his chest and he said, take that off of your head. And the guy was like, what? Come on. I just, and he reached like he wanted to grab communion. He goes, okay, you're done. He blessed him. He goes, you're done. And the guy stood there. So now I stepped to the side and I looked at the guy and he saw me because he hadn't seen me yet. He saw me and he just walked away and then he left. And the priest looked at me and he said, thank God you're here, Chris. So I received the Eucharist, walked out right behind the guy. He walked outside and my two officers were there. And we stopped and we tried to start, just trying to find out who he was and what he was doing there. And at one point, he wouldn't give us his real name. We knew he was playing the name game. We went to go pat him down. He punched one of my officers and then took off running. I started running after him on foot. He ended up going into a neighborhood and hiding in a garage. And then we found him, converged on him. It was a fight. This guy fought 6 of us like a rabid animal. I mean, this was a really bad fight. It took a lot to get this guy into custody. So just imagine, though, if there wasn't an officer already on scene, what could have happened in that church. And this guy, like I said, he fought like an animal. It was a bad fight with 6 cops. Imagine if no cop was on scene at that time. Imagine what would have happened. All right, so what's the plan, right? It's about time you get to it, Chris. What's the plan to secure a church? The best security that you can hope to have is to hire an off-duty officer from the local police department. They're already armed, already trained. They have direct communication with dispatch and all the other officers in that area. One word from that officer, 110 code, okay, and he's got the world coming to him. So you can't go wrong with hiring a police officer. He's going to have a marked police car with him. He's going to be in full police uniform. That right there is the greatest deterrent that you can have. So, hopefully that car will be parked in a very conspicuous area. Anybody can see it coming in. That's your best plan. It can be expensive. And when I say hire an off-duty officer, it's not that he doesn't have the same arrest powers and everything else that an on-duty officer has. It's just they're off-duty. It's an extra duty detail. The church will pay the city, I don't know how many dollars, whatever it is an hour, to have an officer and a car there at the scene. And the officer will work however many hours the church wants. And again, you just can't go wrong with that. Now, a lot of parishes can't afford that. I get that. You can actually call a local police department sometimes go, hey, can we get a little extra patrol during these hours? Just have, and the city will do that. The department will do that. They'll send an officer in there a little more than usual. Not the greatest plan, not the greatest amount of security, but it's better than nothing. And if you have an off-duty officer at your church during Mass and stuff like that, they're going to know instinctively, because of their training and experience, where the vulnerabilities are anyway. And they're going to tailor their approach based on those vulnerabilities. But you can have that officer do a walkthrough of the church prior to Masses starting. Just kind of give him the lay of the land so he knows basically where he needs to go in case of an emergency. And kids, don't worry about kids seeing an armed police officer in Mass. I've been to so many Masses where there's armed police, just attending, like taking their lunch break and attending Mass on a Sunday, because that's the only time they can or whatever, or just hitting a Mass and wanting to attend Mass in uniform. Kids don't have a problem with it. And I'll point you to the Jewish people. Look at, and I'll put this picture up, but the teachers in Israel, when they take their kids on field trips, the teachers are carrying machine guns. The kids, they don't think twice about it. And in fact, I think they feel a little more secure knowing that teacher, who's always trained, has a machine gun to protect us in case something happens, in case there's an attack. Okay, so what do you do if you can't or won't hire an off-duty officer to be there, and you have to kind of do it yourself? Here's some basic ways to secure a church as civilians, and as, if hopefully you would have a security team in place. You can still ask your local police department to come and do a security analysis, and they'll make recommendations. It should be completely free to ask for that. That's a good resource to start with. Or you may have to hire a security consultant. It's a one-time thing, so it's not like having to pay for an officer every Mass, but that security consultant can still give you some very good information and some tips on how to secure a church. But one of the best things to do is to limit the amount of entrances into a church, unless you can cover every entrance with personnel, trained personnel, security. Again, lay people or civilians, just members of the parish that are willing to step up. We can train them. The local police department can train them to a certain extent on what to look for. There's characteristics of an armed person that if you're looking correctly, you can spot them. Not all the time, but again, it helps. I mean, some churches have 4, 5, 6, even more different entrances to their church, sometimes from back behind the altar. And because there's some churches that the sanctuary is there, and then there's a chapel behind it, and then they have entrances for that. Side entrances, the one of it, you're going to have to limit the amount of entrances that are open. Some people are going to complain. Some people are going to say it's an inconvenience. But to that I say, too bad. And if you explain it to them and why you're doing that, I think most people would be understanding and maybe even appreciative that, you have security on your mind. Consider putting signs out in front of your church saying, something like, for the safety of all parishioners and guests, there is armed security on site. Get rid of those asinine signs that say this is a gun-free zone or whatever, because there are parishes, believe it or not, that have signs out front saying no firearms allowed and things like that. That is beyond ridiculous. And it's so irresponsible to have out in front of a church. Get rid of those signs at the very least. But consider putting up a sign saying there's armed security on site. If highway rest stops can have those signs, why can't a church put that up? Let the bad guy know. Have these guys get a little bit of training. And I say guys, plural, I think there should be at least 2 people at the door, because it's harder to distract 2 guys. If there's one guy at the door and, somebody he hasn't seen in a while, it's a fellow parishioner, hey, how you doing? Meanwhile, who's walking by you, and you're not even looking at them. If you have 2 guys there at the door, and this is not the time to stop and socialize with your fellow parishioners. You're there to do a job, okay? Look at these people, look them in the eye, and greet them. Hello, how are you? Welcome. Meanwhile, you're looking at them. You're looking to see if there's any bulges on his waist, or if he's dressed weirdly, or there's any other like bulges on the ankle, things like that. You're looking him up and down. Just that, you will be amazed. Just doing that, a lot of times can prevent somebody from doing something wrong. Now, there's a thing that we call in law enforcement probing. Before a lot of people before an attack, they'll go to somewhere that they want to attack, and they will probe the security there. They'll walk in, maybe do something weird, not something overtly disruptive, right? But they'll do something weird to see, okay, how are they going to react to this? The 9/11 hijackers did that. They went through security at the airports a few times just to see, okay, what can we get away with here? Watch out for that kind of behavior. And if somebody does something that is off, call the police. Let them just check them out. Run the guy's name, see if he's got a past or whatever. Again, involving the police. Now the guy's, okay, now I'm on record as being here. Okay. And a lot of times that will prevent anything from happening. Another very important point to make here is the security people, really all parishioners, but the security people in particular, don't rationalize away weird behavior. You see a guy driving up on the sidewalk, don't sit there and go, oh man, what an idiot. What is he? No, that's a threat. See that as a threat and engage as many of your fellow security people. Get somebody on the phone right away to 911. You can always cancel them. You can always say, false alarm, sorry, but this guy freaked us out or whatever. Police don't mind. They'd rather get a call early and start heading that way and then be canceled than never get a call. I can't tell you how many times, we heard, well, I didn't think too much of it at the time. I thought about maybe calling, but I didn't want to bother you guys. Meanwhile, something bad happened. And we get so frustrated. We're like, please, just call us. We can always cancel and turn around and go, whatever. It's not a big deal. Get somebody headed on that way. If somebody's driving across the grass toward the building, take it for what that is. Don't rationalize that kind of behavior away. Now, some parishes, some pastors may not be great with this idea, but consider giving, these ushers or these security guys name tags or something that says security on them. I've seen some churches, and it was a great idea. They all had the same color jacket on. They all had the same jackets. It was like, I remember one where they were kind of like a bright green jacket. Couldn't miss these guys, and if they say security on them, it doesn't have to be a big thing on the back saying security, little tag that says security, and you see all the same jackets around the parish. You're going to think, okay, these people have something going here. They have some kind of training, they'll think, or, they'll have some kind of plan in place. Maybe I'll go somewhere else. Think about that. And if you do get a security team in place, have the local police department come by and do some training every once in a while. Again, that should be for free. They have these community-oriented policing units. That's their job, is to go and talk to, different places and give security ideas and things like that. It was different than what I did. Mine was more, look, you're probably going to get hit. This is how to prevent it kind of thing. Community-oriented policing guys, they would go and they're more, shaking hands and kissing babies, things like that. But a lot of them also are trained in crime prevention and things like that. But have a police officer come over and regularly engage with your security people and give them updated training. There has to be ongoing training with these security officers, especially, if a new guy comes in, an older guy may leave the security team, new guy comes in, whatever. If there's turnover, that's when more training needs to be done. So engage with your local police department with the training as well. And most of them will be happy to do it. If there's a local police department that doesn't want to do it, call the sheriff's office. That's over that county. Maybe they'll do it. If they don't want to do it, call your state police. Call your highway patrol. Anybody. Reach out to anybody that you can. Now, I think it's also very important to have your security team, once it's in place, to be connected by radios. And I'll go into that why in a little bit, and wear the earpieces so that they can be in the church, so that the earpieces so that the radios won't be squawking and disrupting mass. Now, there must be outside security at these places. That's a non-negotiable. You have to have outside security. And you must have at least one armed security officer on site. If you can't have a police officer, maybe it's an off-duty guy who, is not working through the off-duty system, but maybe he's from a different jurisdiction and he's just there for mass, see if he can become part of the security team and be armed. At least one. More than one would be great. Now, when I say you need somebody armed, I'm not talking about somebody who just simply straps on a sidearm or pistol and goes about walking around. The guy's got to be trained. if you're a civilian, if you're not prior law enforcement or military, take a tactical pistol course. They're all over the country. They're offered all over the place. They'll teach you some very good tactics because usually they're taught by ex-military or law enforcement people. Take a tactical pistol course. Take a lot of shooting courses, because the last thing we want is somebody that's untrained and what we call spray and pray, just shooting all over the place if something happens. That's no help to us. In fact, it's more harm than good. So you also have to be trained in weapons retention so that your weapon can't be grabbed from you and used against the congregation. So there's got to be some training here before you start carrying guns. Don't just, it's not the Wild West. Don't just throw a gun on and think that that's somehow going to, do some good, because it's probably going to do more harm than good. And with the outside security, that's where the radios come into play. If there's somebody outside and they see, like this guy in Minneapolis, getting out of his car with weapons, he could get on the radio to the armed contingent, even the one-armed guy, not one-armed, but the one guy that's armed, and, okay, we got a threat out here, guns outside. That's all he's got to say. Then the armed guy can run out and engage. Now, there should also be a guy trained to be the communications security officer. As soon as he hears on that radio earpiece, threat, gun, whatever, he should get on 911 and call for a response from the local police department. And he should be trained well enough to know how to articulate what's going on. I'll never forget, there was a situation. I was working evening shift one night. I was a sergeant, and we get a call goes out at my parish. And this is before I really got involved in the parish and all that stuff, but got put out as a suspicious person inside the church. And I knew the 5:30 Mass was going on. So we responded there, and what happened was there was like one of the ushers or whatever, he got on 911. This guy, he was like 18, 19, 20 years old, I forget, but he was a younger guy. And right in the middle of the consecration, he got up and started walking across the backs of the pews, walking across, kicking people. Okay, so now he's attacking people. This is an attack during a Catholic Mass. The way the guy who called 911 put it was, there's a guy, he's a strange fellow and he's doing strange things. Can you have an off? No. That's when you get on the phone and say, there is an attack in progress at my church. I don't know if he's armed or not. I haven't seen a gun, but get somebody over here. There has to be a sense of urgency relayed to the dispatcher. Thank God we were right around the corner and we were able to respond that night really quickly. But so what I'm saying is that person, that communications security guy, has to be trained to know when, what to say and how to articulate it. It's very important. That's a crucial aspect of any security team. And to get back to the outside security, they serve as the early warning system for any kind of security contingent that is present in a church. People can jump up then and lock all the doors if they know there's a threat outside. And like I said, the armed guy can go out there and engage. The guy from Minneapolis, that scumbag in Minneapolis that shot up the outside of the church, he got off well over 100 rounds of ammunition. But if there was somebody outside that as soon as he saw that guy picking up the long gun and he started engaging, throwing rounds downrange at this guy, he never would have gotten, maybe he wouldn't have gotten off any rounds because he would have gone and ducked for cover. But he certainly wouldn't have gotten off over 100 rounds. So you see why I'm saying outside security is extremely important to any security plan. And it's important to remember and to realize that not every attack is going to involve a gun. It could be a knife. It could be pipes. It could be improvised explosive devices. It could be cars. Just the other day, there was some guy who rammed his car into a Catholic church. Just the other day. I think it was after the shooting even. So don't be looking just for guns or thinking just about guns. Look at the physical makeup of your parish. Is there a runway from a street right up and right into the church that he could just drive a car right through the front doors or right through a wall even? If there is, you know what, Father, let's put some nice big concrete planters in that path. We fill it with flowers. Looks nice and welcoming, doesn't it, Father? Meanwhile, it acts as a security deterrent. It acts as we call them bollards. Look at any Target department store. Those big red balls that are out front that all the kids love to jump and climb up on. Do you think those are there just for looks, just for funsies? No, those are bollards, people. Those are security methods. Those are to keep cars from driving through the front door. Okay? Most people don't think about that, though, do they? They don't see those and go, wow, Target's unwelcoming to me. They don't want me. No, you walk right through them or right between them, and the kids are jumping on and they're joining mom and dad going into the store. Think about that kind of thing. If you don't want to put planters up, dig a trench. Dig a trench right there. It could be a water catchment area. It could be just somewhere where water runoff goes into. But at least the car is not going to get over that, right? And keep going at a high speed through the wall or through the front door of the church. Now, if there is an attack that's occurring and it's outside or even inside, have the person calling 911 say exactly what's going on, but also describe the security officer who is engaging, the armed security officer who is engaging, because you don't want the police coming in and, all they're going to see is a guy with a gun. So you want to tell them, look, there's one of our security officers is wearing a bright green jacket. He's a good guy. He's shooting back at the bad guy. Be that open and honest about it. And if you are that armed security person that is engaging the bad guy, when you see the police pull in or you see them coming up in this, what we call the stick, you've seen, one after another behind shields or whatever, throw the gun away, get on the ground with your hands out. You're done. Your job is done at that point. The police are there. Don't make it to where there's going to be a mistake, okay, or an accident. Throw the gun down and prone yourself out and just wait for the commands of the police. You'll probably get handcuffed. You will probably be secured until they figure out who the heck you are, okay? But that's okay. And if there is an attack from the outside, have the people inside shelter in place. Get down as low as they can under the pews, behind some kind of really, good wall, like a concrete wall if possible. Shelter in place. Don't have them go running out toward the attack. Now, if there's an attack that starts on the inside, definitely get them all out as fast as you can. That's the beauty of most of these doors. They have the bars that all you got to do is push, and they call them panic bars. Push and you're out. You can lock them to where people can't get in those doors, but they can easily get out the doors. Get them out of the church and as far away from the building as possible. Now, if they can't, and the rounds are coming, just shelter in place, get under the pew. Fathers, cover your wives and your children as best you can. Let the armed security officer take out the bad guy. Hopefully, it'll happen quickly and with as few shots as possible. Again, that's where the training comes in. Now, the ones where if you can get them out of the church and they're running out the door, this is where outside security is crucial. The outside security guy must do regular rounds of that church, every door, to make sure that there isn't an improvised explosive device outside. Unfortunately, there's too many times where attackers will put something like that right outside the door, start a shooting, hoping people are going to run out right past that package, okay, that's going to explode and take more of them out. Or they could have a partner out there start, willing and ready to start shooting as the people flee. Again, that's why, outside security can be an asset that's just so important. So we can send everybody out a different exit. You know what I'm saying? Or if there's a package, you shut everything down. Nobody comes out that door. And then you call the police. Listen, we have an unattended package out here. Now that's the term, use that term, unattended package or unattended bag. Okay. That's a phrase that's used in police work and in Homeland Security kind of work, because too many people, the terrorists, they'll leave a backpack. You've seen it on the news. Okay. And it goes boom later on. So if there's an unattended package or anything like that, try it, get the police on the way, tell them it, and then try to go, okay, whose is that? I'll never forget, I was working a presidential visit, George W. Bush, and he was in a ballroom, a huge ballroom at this hotel. And I was standing there, and, we always worked very closely with the Secret Service whenever a presidential, or a sitting president or any real dignitary came to our city. We had them very often. And they had the doors to the ballroom open. And I looked down and there was a camera case, big camera case, sitting there unattended. Nobody was around it. And I'm like, oh man. So I saw one of the Secret Service agents. I go, come over here. I go, unattended bag. And he was getting on the radio right away. And it was funny because George W. Bush had just finished his comments and he was walking around the room shaking hands. And when that Secret Service agent got on the radio, I noticed the security guys got him to the opposite end of the ballroom. Okay, we're going to say hi to these people over here. And then just as all that happened, some news guy that was in the news pool, the press pool, he came over and he's, that's mine. And the Secret Service agent lit into him. He's like, you know better than that, and he was angry, and rightly so. So what I'm saying is, you call 911, say you have an unattended package near one of the doors during a mass, you're going to get that attention. You're going to get the attention that's needed. And of course, all these things that I'm talking about here, they are pending the pastor's approval. If I were you, wanted security at our parish, it has none, and we want some kind of security at our parish, I would get a group of guys together, okay, having your concerns written down, but don't just go and throw a problem at your pastor. Go to him with solutions. I used to tell my guys that worked for me, don't come to me with just a problem. I want to see a solution as well. What do you recommend a solution would be for this problem? Go into your pastor, ask for an off-duty police officer to be present at every mass. If he can't or won't do it, offer to start that security team and show them the plan, or tell them, look, we're going to come up with a plan pending your approval. You can approve all of it, none of it, whatever, and tell him what you plan to do and have that meeting with him. I don't know many pastors who wouldn't at least let parishioners volunteer to do that kind of thing. The armed thing, I don't know. Some pastors are weird. Some of them are very welcoming to have people that are armed in their congregation. But start that conversation with your pastor. Don't go off half-cocked, as it were, and just, make up your own. This has to have the approval of the pastor at least. And I'm telling you, like I said in my last video, there has got to be at least one either current or retired law enforcement officer in every parish. There just has to be. Either that or a military veteran, who can lend their expertise to a security team. Engage those guys. Put out a call to them. You may not know who is retired military or law enforcement or even current law enforcement. Put it in the bulletin. Say we are seeking, this type of person to help, head up a security detail for our parish. I'd be very surprised if somebody didn't volunteer. So in a nutshell, that's my plan. It's a very basic plan. There's a lot more that goes into it, okay? But I think it's a basic way to at least get started. I'm going to reiterate, involve your local police department, okay? Let your pastor know what you want and what you plan to do, and let him approve it, but do something. It is time, folks, that every single church, Catholic church in this country, must have a security contingent. Yes, thank God these types of attacks are relatively rare. But don't go around thinking that it's not going to happen to you or your parish. Please make a plan, go forward with it, commit to it. And above all, pray for the protection of our blessed Lord, of St. Michael the Archangel. Keep your head on a swivel. I hope this helps. I plan on doing more of these with maybe going into a little bit more detail. But again, I just wanted to put the basics out there, give you guys something to work with. And until next time, Padre Pio, Ora pro nobis.